In this video, we are going to look at ways of automating checkboxes and radio buttons using a combination of Selenium and Java. Okay, so here I am in my IDE. I have already created my class and written few initial steps wherein I am initializing the driver and managing the timeouts and adding a maximize function to maximize my window. Right. And today again we would be working with semantic UI site, and plus along with that we would also be working with the Internet Heroku app, right? For we would use the semantic UI to work with radio buttons, and we would use the Internet Heroku app to work with checkboxes. The basic difference between a radio button and a checkbox is that radio buttons are single select. So if you have a bunch of radio buttons and pertaining to the same context, you would not be able to select more than one, right? And in checkboxes they are always multi-select. Okay, that's the basic difference, right? Basically they are both the same things known by different terms. And if you just look through the semantic UI page, you would find that there are other elements also, right? You can find slider, and then you can find the toggle button. These are, I would say, different variants of radio buttons and checkboxes itself. They offer the same functionality, but with a little more added, caveats to it. So, like in case of toggle, you can switch them on and off by a simple click. But in cases of radio buttons, you generally do not have the option of unselecting the selected radio button. Right, if you have attempted any online tests, you generally have a separate button to clear your selections. Okay, so that being said, let's move on to our code and look into the ways of automating this. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do is locate our element, right? So let me just inspect this. I can see that I have an input type named radio, and it has got a name attribute as example. Okay, but it is class hidden. So this tells me that if I try to click on this particular element, it will probably return me an exception. It might either give you element not interactable exception or click intercepted. Right. Let's just look at that in action. Okay. So go ahead and do. Let's just execute this once and see what happens. Okay. So as expected, it gave me an error saying that my element click was intercepted. Right. So let's re reformat this locator and click on the right element. Okay. Wait a second. Is this selected by default? Let's just refresh the page once. Yeah, once a week is the default selection when the page opens. So let's click on once a day, right? So let's make the XPath for it. Okay, so this particular XPath gives me the correct selection. Check that. Yes. Let's use this in our script. Now let's just run this once. Okay, so one test case passed and it is clicking on once a day. Okay, so once again, we need a method to verify this click, right? So for that, we can use is selected, and that is quite intuitive as well. So I'll just do, and as we can see, this would return me a boolean. Okay, for now, let's just print this out. Let's run it again. Okay, so it's printing false. We can use this in conjugation with our assert statement to mark the test case as true or false. Something like this. Okay, so in case this button is not actually clicked, this will give you a false. So let's just comment this out once and see it in action. Right, expected true, actual false. That's it. Right, and that was about radio button. Checkboxes work in exactly the same way. It's just that we can do multiple clicks on it. Okay, for checkboxes, let's go ahead and use the Internet Heroku app for a change. And here I am. In this, I will select checkboxes. So we can directly use this in our driver.get. And one thing to notice is that checkbox 2 is pre-selected. That is, it is selected by default. So let's go ahead and inspect checkbox 1. I would be trying to click on this, and over here it has got a form ID checkbox. Okay, and okay, so in this case I would have to click on this input tag, that is this box itself, and clicking on checkbox, clicking on the form as we did in our semantic UI side would actually not result in the selection of the checkbox. So I would get this input tag that has got type checkbox. Text path for this should be fairly simple. Okay, so this should work for it. Let's try and input this in our code. Okay, so in my test class, I have disabled the previous test, and in this particular test, I'm starting the web page, the Internet Heroku app, then searching for the web element using the XPath that we created, then clicking on the checkbox, then printing out whether the checkbox is selected or not, and then asserting it using is selected like we did in our previous example. Okay, so let's just run this once. Fine, so we can see that it selected my checkbox 1 also. Let's just look at the logs and verify that again. Okay, so passes 1 true. Right, let's do one thing. Let's click on this again and check whether this is getting deselected or not. Okay, so let's just run this. Let's look at the logs. Right, first it printed true for selected, then deselecting, then false, then my test case failed because we were just asserting for true. Okay, so that was all about radio button and checkboxes. And using these basics and programming logics, you can actually automate all the testing scenarios that would be related to your checkboxes and radio buttons. Okay, thank you and hope you have a good day.